Aboriginal religious life in pre-colonial Australia is one of the world's oldest religious traditions. It is at least 60,000 years old, and it encompassed the worship of nature and several ceremonial practices that were deeply connected with the land. Despite colonization almost destroying Aboriginal religious life, its practices and rituals still live on today. Stay tuned for a deep dive into Aboriginal religion, one of humanity's most fascinating religious traditions. You're watching All Things Humanities. At the core of Aboriginal religious life was and still is the dreaming. The dreaming was when ancestral beings created all geographical features as well as plants, animals, and humans. The word dreaming is generally preferred in Aboriginal culture over the word dream time because it's a living and present spirituality that continues to evolve today. For Aboriginal people, the dream time was not a historical, distant event, but rather a present reality that connected the past, present, and future. Nevertheless, Aboriginal people believed that the land and the people were created by the ancestor spirits. These spirits made the rivers, streams, waterholes, and the land. These created beings also created the laws, customs, and social structures that would then govern Aboriginal life. In Aboriginal religion, creation stories often featured powerful ancestral beings who travelled across the land. During their travels, they would shape the land and then establish sacred sites. These beings took various forms depending on the region that they lived in. For example, in parts of Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, creator ancestors were believed to be giant snakes, while other regions had different creator figures. Another good example of this is the story of the Marloloo songline. In Aboriginal culture, songlines are a system of oral storytelling that communicates geographical and cultural information. For Aboriginal Australians, the spiritual realm was and still is accessible through ritual ceremony and engagement with these sacred sites. Ceremonial practices were also a central part to Aboriginal religious life. The most significant ceremonies were in fact corroborees. A corroboree was a ceremonial meeting of Australian Aboriginals who would interact with the Dreamtime through music, costume, and also dance. Corroboree served as a connector between humanity and the dreaming, which allowed participants to interact with great spiritual beings. During these ceremonies, events from the dreaming are often reenacted to strengthen the spiritual bond between the people and the land. Dances in corroborees would often mimic animals and birds that were associated with ancestral beings from the dreaming. In these dances, there were and still are specific movements for the arms, body, and the feet. They would also sing or chant stories from the dreaming. At times, these songs were accompanied by instruments. Storytellers may have chanted the entire dreaming stories, while dancers would also mime them at the same time. Instruments like the didgeridoo, clapsticks, and drums were also used in corroborees. In coastal areas, shells and leaves were often tied to the dancers' ankles to create louder sounds. Participants often wore special costumes, sacred objects, or even ornaments that were made from materials that were important to that particular group. Body painting with designs made from ochre, charcoal, and ash was common, once again making connection to the land and its resources. Women's ceremonies specifically involved intricate body painting designs that were related to Dreamtime stories. Another key part of Aboriginal religious life was initiation ceremonies. Initiation ceremonies marked crucial transitions in Aboriginal life, particularly the passage to adulthood. One example was the walkabout, a rite of passage journey during adolescence where one would live in the wilderness for 6 months. These initiation processes often involved receiving sacred knowledge that were associated with one's totem. Smoking ceremonies represented another significant ritual practice with deep religious meaning. These ceremonies involved the smouldering of various native plants to create smoke. The smoke is believed to be able to heal people both spiritually and physically. This has been believed to have cleansing properties, as the ability to ward off unwanted and bad spirits was very common at this time. Smoking ceremonies were also performed at significant life milestones. This includes ceremonies for birth, where newborns were welcomed and the smoking ceremony ensured the health of the mother and the child. And it also included situations where someone had passed away. In this instance, the smoking ceremony would assist the spirit's journey and would also purify the space of the deceased. Aboriginal Australians may have also removed a tooth to express grief and respect for someone who had passed away. In Aboriginal religion, sacred sites were fundamental to Aboriginal religious life. Sacred sites served as connectors to the spiritual realm and also ancestral beings. These sites took many forms, including quarries, where Aboriginal Australians sourced rock for tools and paint, rock art sites, including rock engravings, paintings, drawings, or stencils, natural sites such as mountains, creeks, waterfalls, or rock formations, ceremonial grounds, sometimes referred to as bora rings. These are two circles made of rock or earth with a connecting pathway where Aboriginal Australians held important meetings, rituals, and ceremonies. Rock shelters, a cave or a rock overhang that was used for shelter and would also contain rock art or artifacts. And lastly, burial sites, which was an important place for burying the remains of people who had died, especially in the form of mounds. Each type of sacred site had specific religious functions, with some sites being gender restricted. Uluru stands as one of Australia's most significant sacred sites for Aboriginal Australians. To the native people, the traditional custodians of Uluru, they see it as not Uluru being just a rock, but a living, breathing cultural landscape. The Anangu people believe that the landscape, including Uluru, was created by ancestral beings. It is also believed that Uluru provides physical evidence of these ancient events for the Indigenous Australians. The spiritual importance of Uluru is far beyond the rock itself. For the Anangu people, the sacred site expands past the rock's ends and goes into the nearby riverbanks and trees around the site. The area contains over 40 sacred Aboriginal sites and 11 dreaming trails. Each region of Uluru has been formed by different ancestral spirits. In the southern side of Uluru, for example, the rock structure was due to a war between the poisonous snakes and the carpet snakes, and the northwest side was created by Mulla, the hare wallaby. Aboriginal Australians also held totemic beliefs. Totems are spiritual emblems that are marked by natural objects like plants or animals. They can be inherited by individuals or by clans or families. Through totemic systems, Aboriginal Australians are linked to both the things of nature and the all-powerful beings of the spiritual realm. These totemic relationships established kinship between humans and natural species. The totemic system provided a foundation for understanding one's place in the universe. Totems allow Aboriginal people to identify with a specific part of the dreaming. It gives them identity, dictates how they express their spirituality, and tells them which other Aboriginal people they are related to in a close family. Totemic relationships also entailed specific religious responsibilities. If someone's totem was a kangaroo, this means that they are prohibited from killing kangaroos within their region. This was also a way to ensure animal populations remain healthy and not overkilled. Among the most sacred religious artifacts were choringa. Choringa could take the form of stone objects, wooden sacred objects, ceremonial poles, or even group paintings. For Aboriginal Australians, these sacred objects were viewed as visible incarnations of great ancestors. These were accepted as sacred objects and played central roles in a ceremonial life. During religious ceremonies, participants wore special adornments and used ritual objects. For corroborees, for example, they paint their bodies and participants would wear various adornments that were special for that occasion. These ceremonial items helped facilitate a connection between the spiritual realm and also ancestral beings. Other sacred objects included earth mounds, which were handled accordingly with specific rules and protocols because they contained sacred status. Another key part of Aboriginal religious life were burial practices. These varied amongst different clans and nations that existed across the continent. Aboriginal people historically used diverse burial methods. The first being ground burials, where bodies were placed in graves in varied positions, such as lying flat on the back, curled on the side, or sitting upright. In some regions, bodies were placed on wooden platforms or even in trees to decompose before secondary burials in caves, rock crevices, or hollow logs. It was also common for burials to involve stone tools or ochre paintings, as the deceased were buried with these different artifacts. For Aboriginal Australians, burial sites are sacred as they served as physical and spiritual links to ancestors and country. They would also provide insights into historical lifestyles, health, and social structures of Indigenous societies.